Hi guys, welcome back to Oval Labs discussion series. Today what we'll be discussing is how is academia becoming a systemic risk. To discuss the topic, we've got Aviral, Ame and Sankalp. Ame is writing a paper for his audit course on the very same topic, and Sankalp already has an article published for the same. If both of you could just talk about your articles and papers for a little bit, and then we'll continue the conversation from there.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So, my paper covers whether academia has become a risk to society through three distinct lenses, which basically is the individual or the academic lens, then it's the governmental lens, and then finally it comes to the political and government policy lens. Right? So, the overarching theme or the conclusion of the paper is how the main way academia has become a risk to us is by reducing our freedom of speech in academia as a whole. And this is a brief summary. Obviously, we'll get a bit more into it, but I would like to pass it on.
I have written a paper on the similar topic. Institutions, educational institutions, by its very definition, are supposed to be a breeding ground for ideas, free ideas. But what our institutions have turned into are political tools of dispensing, leftist ideas, and that's entirely contrary to what educational institutions are supposed to do. My paper merely discusses one aspect of it, of how foreign educational institutes have affected Indian institutions, and primarily legal institutes are being affected. I'll discuss more about it later.
See, what I also noticed is that the problem is not with the studies which are only towards the left side. That's fine. But at least we should be educated also about the other side. The problem is the biasness, the incline which institutes are having towards the left wing and all towards the left media or all the sources which come through. Today, for everything which we are taught in law school at least, it is very much biased and it is only showing one side of the story. And as of course we are going to become lawyers, we are the future of the country. If that is biased only towards one side, then it is surely not fair as how we proceed.
One thing that from Sakal, from your paper, one thing that came to my mind was, I think you cited another article in your paper which talked about how in universities in the US, almost 88% of the professors there and faculty, they identify as Democrats, while only 11% of them being Republicans. And again, and I think that is something that is also happening in India, because if we look at it, our professors are nothing but preachers of the left. And what I believe is that, especially in institutions which shape your future litigators, future policy makers, and future judiciary, if you're people who are graduating from those institutions and they've only been introduced to one side of the spectrum while completely ignoring another, then that is problematic. The trajectory of the discourse is something that needs to be altered. It needs to come again from going all left. It needs to come back to a neutral standpoint, because academic institutions are places where discourse should be promoted. And as long as you don't have intellectual, if you would just help me, how do I put it in better words? Where you have people who challenge you intellectually, there won't be any new ideas. You won't be able to come up with newer and better policies which are more inclusive. And inclusivity is again something that these very institutions preach.
I have an example of today itself to illustrate how this ideology propagation defies logic. Today itself I was told that calling India inclusive is discriminatory. That has no logical justification to it, no moral justification to it. And when this entire Indian discourse today is hell-bent on holding institutions accountable, be it judiciary, be it parliament, why is academic institutions, they are not being held accountable for anything? Why are they allowed to do anything that they have in mind? That's a problem, and the consequences would be disastrous for us.
Right, but then, not to play the devil's advocate here, I feel like academic institutions themselves aren't doing everything that they want, but it's rather a liberal left agenda that's being pushed onto academia, right, which is blocking in our case, the right from speaking up and talking about certain agendas and discourses. And this is very prominent if you look at research papers and journals. They tend to publish articles that are more likely to be in line with the discourses that they preach, right? And again, this is the entire can of worms, and it's opening Pandora's box when we look at the entire peer review process for journals, right? So now let's say, Akash, if I submit a paper to you as a journal, right, there's something called a double-blind peer review process, which is that if I submit it to you, I do not know you are the researcher or the academic who is reviewing my paper and seeing as to, how good it is or what your biases as your own academic are. So now, what will happen is that you'll look at the paper, you'll review it, you'll write your remarks, and you'll basically determine whether the paper is good enough to be published into the journal. Now, after that, the paper will be sent to Sankalp, who will be the second reviewer. Now, this can go on. There's a single blind peer review and there's a triple blind peer review. But the whole problem is the opacity in the process. Me, as a researcher who has submitted my paper, won't know that, okay, are you a left-wing preacher who hates right-wing ideologies, or do you simply not like what I am writing about, right? So now I suggest that we have an open peer review session.
I think that, as you said, is really incredible. And what I would like to add is the hypocrisy here is how we are taught. Let's say we are taught about nationalism, for an example. We have seen when it's nationalism, it's only one side of it which is shown. You are questioning nationalism to students who have to really build the nation in the coming years. That's fine. You want to question it, but then also give arguments which support it. You are talking about inclusivity, you are talking about everyone being equal and all, but then you are only preaching one side. That is completely unfair. Whether it's every social sciences class you go to, it's literally every paper you study, every article they give is from a publication which the world knows is a left wing. You bring both the sides on the table and let the students then decide what is their inclination and how they form an idea according to that.
I think he was right on this point that this is an institutional attempt to unilaterally propagate one idea, because it's not just the professors who are leftist, it's the curriculum in itself. Most of the students of a law school are there for placements in future. They have to read something and write on it. If the curriculum itself propagates only one idea, they'll eventually read that, they'll eventually write about that, and that implicitly gets infused in their mind. And that's how we are brainwashing each and every legal student of this country.
One thing that, sorry to cut you off, but one thing that I've noticed, especially in our classrooms, is that whenever someone voices out an opinion that might be a bit conservative or might lean a bit towards the right, all of us, we are glared at by by classmates, people, they look at us with disgust. And again, if you're at the risk of being cancelled just because you're voicing out your political opinions, then sorry to say, the institution you're in is not a university. It's nothing but a cult, that with the syllabus. That's what I have to say. And one more thing that, as you said, for research papers, I think again in one of the articles, I think it was you or we will definitely provide a link for that in the description. But one of the things that I meant that I read was that one of the Harvard journals, there was a conversation among editors of a Harvard journal who basically did not let an article be published just because the author of the particular piece was a conservative. Now journals like Harvard are the ones who are not letting opinions come to the forefront, then how are we sure that the academic discourse will go forward? How are we sure that academic discourse stays neutral?
Right. And then I think to bring it to a conclusion, we can say that effectively right now, as it is, institutions have become echo chambers to preach the current mainstream discourse without there being any other discourses to challenge it, leading to a conflation of ideas, right? And I think that's a good place to leave it off for now, and we can pick up on it maybe in a second episode or later on. Yeah?
So I think that was it for today. Thank you so much, guys, and we hope to see you in the next session. Leave comments if you have some recommendation for us. Thank you.